During vows, my wife's mother yelled, "You'll ruin her." But the priest wasn't silent. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the moment I'd stand hand in hand with the woman I loved, promising forever. Instead, those words shattered the calm, turning a sacred moment into chaos. My name is Robert, and this is the story of how my wedding day became a battlefield, and how one unexpected voice changed everything. Hey, before we dive deeper, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment with your city and country. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now let's step into that day, where the flowers were perfect, the guests were smiling, but something was brewing beneath the surface. It was a warm June afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina. The venue, a charming old church with stained glass windows, glowed under the golden sunlight. The pews were packed with family and friends, their chatter filling the air like a soft hum. I stood at the altar, tugging at my tie, feeling the weight of every eye on me. My palms were sweaty, but not from nerves about marrying Emily. No, I was ready for her. For us. She was my anchor, the woman who'd laughed with me through late-night pizza runs and held me together when my dad passed 2 years earlier. Emily was my home, but there was a shadow in the room, one I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the usual wedding jitters. It was the way Emily's mother, Linda, kept glancing at me from the front row, her lips pressed into a thin line. It was the way her sister, Jessica, whispered something to their cousin, their eyes darting my way. I brushed it off. Weddings bring out all kinds of emotions, right? People get tense, protective. I told myself it was nothing. Let me paint the scene for you. Emily looked like a vision in her ivory dress, the lace trailing behind her like a whisper. Her smile, when she walked down the aisle, made my heart skip. The guests were a mix of our worlds. My mom, wiping tears from her eyes. My brother, Mark, giving me a thumbs up from the groomsmen's line. And Emily's family, a tight-knit group from the suburbs of Atlanta. Her dad, Tom, was all smiles, proud as ever. But Linda? She sat stiffly, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. I caught her staring at me again, her eyes cold like she was sizing me up. On my side, there was my best man, Chris, who'd been my rock since college. He leaned over during the processional and whispered, "You nervous, Rob?" I shook my head, grinning. "Not about her," I said, and I meant it. Emily and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 1. We'd planned this day down to the last detail, the peonies in her bouquet, the playlist for the reception, even the way the candles flickered on the altar. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. But there were cracks beneath the surface, ones I hadn't seen coming. Emily had warned me about her mom. "She's intense," she'd said months ago, laughing it off. "She just wants me to be happy." I nodded, thinking it was typical mother-in-law stuff. Linda had always been polite to me, if a little distant. She'd ask pointed questions about my job. I'm a high school history teacher, or my plans for the future. "Teaching's noble," she'd say, her tone implying it wasn't enough. I figured she'd warm up eventually. Then there was Jessica, Emily's younger sister. She was 25, sharp-tongued, and fiercely protective of Emily. At the rehearsal dinner, she'd made a toast that felt more like a warning. "To Emily," she'd said, raising her glass, "may you always know what's best for you." Her eyes locked on mine, and the room laughed, but it didn't feel like a joke. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to sibling loyalty. The other guests? A mix of cousins, aunts, uncles, and friends from both sides. My mom, Diane, was beaming, thrilled to see her youngest son tie the knot. My brother, Mark, was cracking jokes with the groomsmen, keeping things light. Emily's dad, Tom, was the kind of guy who'd hug you twice before saying hello. Everyone seemed happy, buzzing with that wedding day energy. The organ played softly. The priest, Father Michael, smiled warmly from the altar. It was the picture of a perfect day. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way Linda's gaze lingered on me, like she was searching for a flaw, or the way Jessica kept huddling with her mom, their heads bent together, whispering. Even Emily seemed tense during the rehearsal, her laugh a little too quick, her eyes darting to her mom every now and then. I asked her if everything was okay, and she squeezed my hand. "Just wedding nerves," she said. I believed her. I shouldn't have. What was at stake that day wasn't just our vows. It was our future, mine and Emily's. It was the life we'd dreamed of, the one we'd built together despite the doubts of others. My job didn't pay much, sure, but we were happy. We had plans, a little house, maybe a dog, kids someday. I thought we were untouchable, but pride was on the line too, especially for Linda. She'd always seen Emily as her golden girl, the one who'd make it big. To her, I was just a guy with a modest paycheck and a rented tux. As Father Michael began the ceremony, his voice calm and steady, I stood next to Emily, her hand warm in mine. The church was quiet, save for the rustle of dresses and the occasional cough. I looked at her, and she smiled back, her eyes sparkling. For a moment, I forgot about Linda's glares, Jessica's whispers, the unease in my gut. This was our day. Nothing could ruin it. Or so I thought. The ceremony moved forward smoothly. We exchanged rings, our fingers trembling with excitement. The guests smiled, some dabbing their eyes. My mom was openly crying now, clutching a tissue. Even Linda seemed to soften, her expression unreadable but less hostile. Father Michael's voice carried through the church, guiding us toward the vows. This was it. The moment we'd been waiting for. I took a deep breath, ready to speak the words I'd practiced 100 times. But then, just as I opened my mouth, a voice cut through the silence like a knife. "You'll ruin her!" It was Linda. She was on her feet, her face flushed, her voice trembling with rage. The church went still, a collective gasp rippling through the crowd. Emily's hand tightened in mine, her breath catching. I turned to look at Linda, my heart pounding. What was happening? Father Michael paused, his hands still raised. The guests froze, their eyes wide, some leaning forward, others whispering. Jessica was gripping her mom's arm, but she didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied, and then, to everyone's shock, Father Michael spoke. The church was a pressure cooker, every breath heavy with anticipation. Emily's hand trembled in mine, her "I do" still ringing in my ears, a fragile thread of hope. Father Michael stood at the altar, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing around us. Linda's outburst, "You'll ruin her," had sliced through the ceremony like a knife, leaving the guests frozen, their whispers buzzing like a swarm of bees. My heart pounded, my tie choking me as I tried to focus on Emily, on the vows we were supposed to share. But the air was thick with tension, and I knew this was only the beginning. Emily's sister Jessica stood beside her mother, arms crossed, her chin lifted defiantly. "Mom's right," she said, her voice loud and cutting. "Someone has to say it, Robert. You're not good enough for her." The words hit like a punch, sharp and personal. My brother Mark shifted in the groomsman's line, his jaw tight. My mom, Diane, gasped softly, her hand clutching a tissue. The guests' murmurs grew louder, their eyes darting between me, Emily, and Jessica. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity, feeding on the drama. "Jess, stop," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. She turned to her sister, her eyes pleading, but there was something else in her tone. Fear, like she knew a storm was coming. My stomach twisted. What was she afraid of? What hadn't she told me? "Emily, you know it's true," Jessica pressed, stepping into the aisle. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to her sister. "You could have anyone, anything. Why settle for him?" She gestured toward me, her lip curling. Settle. The word stung, a blade to my pride. I wasn't rich, sure. I was a high school history teacher, not some corporate hotshot, but I loved Emily. We'd built a life together. Late-night talks, shared dreams, a future we both wanted. Or so I thought. Doubt crept in, cold and insidious. Did Emily feel this way too? I squeezed her hand, searching her face, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her gaze was locked on her mother, who stood rigid, hands clenched, her face a mask of anger and pain. "Linda, please." "Tom," Emily's dad said, rising from his seat. His voice was gentle but strained, like he was trying to defuse a bomb. "This is their day, let's not do this." But Linda shook her head, her eyes burning into me. No, Tom, it has to be said. He'll drag her down just like I warned her. Warned her? The words landed like another blow. Had Linda been planting seeds of doubt all along? I thought back to her subtle digs, her comments about my job, her praise of Emily's ambition like it was something I couldn't match. I'd brushed it off, but now it felt like a calculated attack. The guests were fully invested now, some leaning forward, others whispering to their neighbors. My best man, Chris, put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Rob?" he muttered. I nodded, but I wasn't. My face burned with humiliation, my heart racing with anger. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat was dry. Father Michael cleared his throat, drawing every eye back to the altar. "Let's take a moment," he said, his voice steady but firm. "This is a sacred space, a place for love and commitment. If there's something to be said, let it be with respect." His words carried a warning, and even Linda hesitated, her shoulders stiffening. But Jessica wasn't done. She took another step, her voice rising. "Respect? Where's the respect for Emily? She's giving up everything, her career, her future, for a guy who can barely afford rent." The accusation was a dagger, twisting deeper. The church was a blur of faces, some shocked, others gleeful. My mom was on her feet now, her voice trembling. "That's enough, Jessica. You don't know my son." Before I could speak, Emily spun toward her sister, her eyes blazing. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cracking like a whip. "This is my choice, Jess. Mine. Not yours, not Mom's." The church went silent, her words hanging in the air, fierce and raw. For a moment I felt a surge of pride. That was my Emily, strong and unyielding. But her hands were shaking, her shoulders tense. She was fighting to hold it together, and it broke my heart. Father Michael raised his hands, his voice cutting through the tension. "Robert, Emily, you stand here to pledge your love. If anyone has a reason these two should not be joined, speak now or forever hold your peace." It was a formality, but the words felt like a dare. Linda was on her feet again, her face flushed, her voice trembling with rage. "I can't hold my peace," she shouted, stepping into the aisle. The guests gasped, some clutching their programs, others leaning forward. Emily's hand tightened in mine, her breath catching. "Linda, please," Tom said, reaching for her, but she shook him off. "I won't stay silent while my daughter throws her life away." Linda pointed at me, her finger shaking. "Robert, you're a nice guy, but you're not enough. Emily deserves better, someone who can give her the life she's worked for." The words were a gut punch, each one heavier than the last. I wanted to fire back, but Emily beat me to it. "Mom, stop!" she cried, her voice raw. "You don't get to tear him down in front of everyone." The church was silent, every eye on us. Linda's face softened for a split second, but then she straightened, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Emily, you're blind. I've seen what happens when you settle. I've lived it." Her eyes flicked to Tom, a fleeting glance that spoke volumes. The crowd caught it, murmurs rippling through the pews. Tom's face fell, his shoulders sagging, and then Linda dropped the bomb. "Robert's been hiding something," she said, her voice cold and deliberate. "I saw him last month meeting with his ex, Sarah, late at night at a coffee shop. He didn't tell you, did he, Emily?" The world tilted. My heart stopped, the guests' whispers erupting into a roar. Emily turned to me, her face pale. "Rob, is that true?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. Yes, I'd met Sarah, my ex from years ago. She'd needed closure after our breakup. It was one coffee, nothing more. I hadn't told Emily because it felt insignificant. But now, twisted by Linda's words, it sounded like a betrayal. "Emily, it's not what she thinks," I said, my voice hoarse. "It was just coffee, I swear." Doubt flickered in her eyes, and it broke me. Father Michael stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Enough." The church froze. "Mrs. Carter, you've made your claim, but truth cuts both ways. Are you prepared to swear your accusations come from love, not control?" His question was a blade, slicing through the tension. Linda's face paled, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Jessica's smirk faded, her eyes darting to her mother. The guests held their breath, waiting for the storm to break. The church was a frozen snapshot, every eye locked on Linda as Father Michael's question hung in the air like a guillotine. Are you prepared to swear your accusations come from love, not control? Her face drained of color, her lips parted, but no sound came. Jessica, standing beside her, looked like she'd been caught off guard, her arms dropping to her sides. The guests were silent, their collective breath held, waiting for what came next. Emily's hand was still in mine, but it felt fragile, like a thread stretched to its breaking point. My heart pounded, my mind racing with what I'd just admitted. Yes, I'd met Sarah, but it was nothing. Nothing like what Linda was making it out to be. Emily turned to me, her eyes searching mine, glistening with unshed tears. "Rob," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why didn't you tell me?" The hurt in her voice was a knife to my chest. I wanted to pull her close, to explain everything, but the weight of the moment held me still. Before I could answer, Father Michael spoke again, his voice steady but carrying a quiet power. "Mrs. Carter, if you have no more to say, I ask you to sit. This is a moment for Robert and Emily to speak their truth." His words were calm but unyielding, a reminder that this was our day, not hers. Linda hesitated, her gaze darting from Father Michael to Emily, then to me. For a moment I thought she might double down, unleash another accusation. But something in her broke. Her shoulders sagged, and she sank back into the pew, her face a mix of defiance and shame. Jessica shot her a look, almost pleading, but sat down too, her earlier bravado gone. The church exhaled, the tension easing just a fraction. Tom, Emily's dad, reached for Linda's hand, but she pulled away, staring at the floor. The guests were whispering again, some shaking their heads, others exchanging shocked glances. My mom, Diane, was still on her feet, her eyes blazing as she glared at Linda. "That was cruel," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You don't know my son." Mark, my brother, leaned toward me, muttering, "You want me to handle this, Rob?" I shook my head, my focus on Emily. She was all that mattered now. Father Michael turned to us, his expression softening. "Robert, Emily, this is your moment. Do you wish to continue?" Emily's eyes met mine, and for the first time since Linda's outburst, I saw a flicker of the woman I loved. Strong, certain, mine. She nodded, her voice quiet but firm. "Yes, I want to marry him." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, some guests even clapping softly. My mom wiped her eyes, a small smile breaking through her tears. Chris, my best man, gave me a quick nod, his grin saying, "You got this." But the weight of Linda's accusations still lingered, a shadow over the moment. I took a deep breath, turning to Emily. "I should have told you about Sarah," I said, loud enough for the front rows to hear, but meant only for her. "It was one coffee, Em. She needed closure, and I thought it was harmless. I didn't want to worry you. I'm sorry." My voice cracked, the honesty raw. "I love you. I've never doubted us, not for a second." Emily's lips trembled, but she squeezed my hand, her eyes softening. "I believe you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I love you too." The church erupted in applause, louder now, a wave of support that drowned out the earlier tension. Father Michael smiled, raising his hands. "Then let us continue." We spoke our vows, our voices shaky but sure. Each word felt like a reclaiming of our day, our love, our future. When Emily said, "I promise to stand by you, through every storm," I knew she meant it, not just for me, but for the family that had tried to tear us apart. When I said, "I'll love you with everything I am," I felt the weight of every eye, every whisper, fade away. It was just us now. As Father Michael pronounced us husband and wife, the guests rose, their applause thunderous. My mom was crying openly, Mark was whooping, and even Tom was clapping, his face a mix of relief and pride. Linda sat silently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her expression unreadable. Jessica stared at her sister, her eyes conflicted like she was wrestling with something she couldn't say. At the reception, the mood shifted. The band played, The dance floor filled, and Emily and I laughed through our first dance, her head on my shoulder. But the shadow of the ceremony lingered. Linda kept her distance, sipping her wine in silence. Jessica avoided us, sticking to her cousins at a corner table. Tom pulled me aside later, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Rob," he said. "Linda, she's protective. Too much sometimes. Give her time." I nodded, but I wasn't sure time would fix this. By the end of the night, Emily and I were exhausted but happy. We'd survived. Our love had held. But as we left for our honeymoon, I knew things had changed. Emily was quieter, her smiles a little forced. The trust we'd built had been shaken, not by my meeting with Sarah, but by her family's betrayal. Looking back, that day was more than a wedding. It was a test of our love, our strength, our ability to rise above the noise. Linda's outburst wasn't just about me. It was about her own fears, her own regrets projected onto Emily. She'd seen her daughter's ambition, her potential, and couldn't fathom why she'd choose a life with me, a guy with a modest job and big dreams. But what she didn't see, what she might never see, was that Emily and I chose each other, not out of convenience or compromise, but out of something deeper. In the weeks that followed, things shifted. Emily and her mom barely spoke. Linda sent a half-hearted apology through Tom, but it felt hollow. Jessica reached out to Emily once, a text that said, "I just want you to be happy." But it was too little, too late. Emily didn't cut them off completely, she's too kind for that. But she set boundaries, something she'd never done before. It was painful, but it was growth. As for us, we're stronger now. That day forced us to face doubts we'd buried, to have hard conversations about trust and family. I'll never forget the look in Emily's eyes when she said, "I believe you." It was a choice, one we both made again every day since. Weddings are supposed to be about joy, but they can bring out the messiest parts of people: pride, fear, control. Ours did. But it also showed us who we are, together. If you're planning your own wedding, or if you've been through something like this, know that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other, even when the world tries to pull you apart. So what do you think? Have you ever seen a wedding moment like this, or faced a family drama that tested your love? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this hit home for you, hit that subscribe button. There's more where this came from. Stories of love, conflict, and everything in between. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.